is Soapstone and how can it help? Soapstone is an acronym that provides you with a series of questions to think about while you are reading a piece of writing. Asking these questions can help you understand the writing better. The more you know about a piece of writing, the easier it will be to analyze it. The S in Soapstone is for speaker. The speaker is the person that is telling the story. Some questions you can ask are, who is the speaker? What background information do I know about this person? How does this information help form his or her opinions? The O is for occasion. The occasion is where and when the writing took place. What is the occasion? When did this piece take place? Where did it occur? The A is for audience. The audience is the group of people who are reading or listening to the piece. Who is the audience? Who is the author directing his or her words at? What do we know about the audience? The P is for purpose. The purpose is the meaning behind the piece. What is the purpose? Why did the author write this piece? What does the author hope to accomplish when addressing the audience with his or her words? S is for the subject, which is what the writing is about. What is the subject? What is the piece about? How do you know? The tone is the author's attitude towards the piece. What is the tone of the author? What is his or her attitude towards the subject? Look at aspects such as sentence structure and word choice. How to identify the author's claim and strategies. A claim is an arguable statement that serves as the primary point of the writing. To identify the author's claim, first, read the passage carefully. Then, analyze it using Soapstone. The purpose and tone of the author are the two most important aspects that will help you find the claim. Once you understand what the author is saying, then you can figure out the claim. Rhetorical device or strategy is figurative language that is intended to have an effect on the audience. In order to figure out the strategies the author has used, first read and annotate the passage. You should know rhetorical devices such as similes, metaphors, and anecdotes. Finally, you should know the audience well because they are who the author is speaking to.
Alrighty, so now that you know the basics of how to write a rhetorical analysis, let's go over a sample one. Here we have a famous speech, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's 1941 State of the Union address delivered to U.S. Congress. First, let's remember to use the soapstone technique when we look at this speech. So let's read it over real quick, shall we?
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, members of the 77th Congress. I address you, members of the 77th Congress, at a moment unprecedented in the history of the Union. I use the word unprecedented because at no previous time has American security been as seriously threatened from without as it is today. Every realist knows the democratic way of life is at this moment being directly assailed in every part of the world. The assailants are still on the march, threatening other nations, great and small. Therefore, as your president, performing my constitutional duty to give to Congress information on the State of the Union, I find it, unhappily, necessary to report that the future and safety of our country and our democracy are overwhelmingly involved in events far beyond our borders. Those who man our defenses, and those behind them who build our defenses, must have the stamina and the courage which come from unshakable belief in the manner of life which they are defending. In future days, which we seek to make secure, we look forward to a world founded upon four essential human freedoms. The first is freedom of speech and expression, everywhere in the world. The second is the freedom of every person to worship God in his own way, everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, which translated into world terms means economic understanding which will secure to every nation a healthy peacetime life for its inhabitants, everywhere in the world. The fourth is freedom from fear, which translated into world terms means a worldwide production of armaments to such a point in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor, anywhere in the world. This is no vision or distant millennium. It is a definite basis for a kind of world attainable in our own time and generation. That kind of world is the very antithesis of the so-called new order of tyranny which the dictators seek to create.
Now that's a lot of info. How about we break it down?
The speaker is Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who has been President of the United States for 8 years now. Going into his third term, he is the longest-serving president in American history. He was widely popular and regarded for saving America from the Great Depression that began 10 years prior. The occasion was the State of the Union address in January 1941. At this time, America is still recovering from the Great Depression. However, in Europe and Asia, the rest of the democratic world is fighting against fascist menaces. The United States has stayed neutral, but Roosevelt is urging Congress to get involved. The audience is Congress. Now at this time, America was very isolationist after World War I, so Congress was reluctant to get involved in the affairs of the world. That's why Roosevelt has such a hard sell to convince them exactly why they need to get involved. Roosevelt's purpose is a rather daunting but also very important one. He's trying to convince Congress why they need to worry about a war that they're intentionally avoiding. It's almost like he's trying to get someone to do an AP Lang project that they haven't started until the night before or something. Luckily, I don't know much about that. Like most great speeches in American history, Roosevelt's subject is freedom. Namely, he's talking about why freedom affects this war, and why if Congress cares about freedom, they have to get involved. Roosevelt's tone is patriotic and idealistic. He knows that Congress thinks it's in their best interest to stay out of the war. Therefore, he needs to convince them that if they're a true patriot, and if they're true to American ideals, they're actually going to want to pay more attention to the war. The claim is that resolute action is needed to combat grave threats to democracy both at home and abroad. Next, we're going to want to revisit our passage and look at all the strategies. We see that President Roosevelt employed 3 key strategies throughout this. Those are highlighted in blue, in appeal to patriotism, highlighted in green, in allusion to the war, and highlighted in yellow, repetition. To begin, you're essentially going to want to write down your introductory paragraph as a soapstone in paragraph format. You touch on your speaker, the occasion, and his purpose. Then you move on to the subject and the audience that they're talking to. You go over their tone, and then describe the strategies and the claim. Like any other essay, you'll want the last sentence of your first paragraph to serve as your thesis. After your introduction, you're going to get right on into the meat of your rhetorical analysis in the body paragraphs. The body paragraphs you want to go in chronological order following the piece of work you're analyzing. You're going to want to follow a pretty typical format to make sure that you hit on all the key bases. You begin with a transition word. In this paragraph we say, Roosevelt begins, by alluding to the war fought in Europe and Asia. The allusion to the war is the strategy, and that's the strategy that you're especially going to focus on in this section of the passage. After you've established the section of the passage you're talking about and what strategy you're going to be focusing on, you begin to give examples. That can be done by embedding quotes and referring to specific lines in the text. For example, when we talk about his allusion here to the war, we mention how he points out that in no previous time has American security been as seriously threatened from without as it is today, and that the democratic life is at this moment being directly assailed in every part of the world. These are direct quotes that exemplify the strategy Roosevelt is employing. Next, you're going to want to elaborate on why the writer chose to word things the way they did there. That'll often include a phrase such as in order to, or in this example it says, this allusion serves to emphasize the gravity of the crisis abroad. That really shows your audience that you understand why the speaker is saying what they're saying, and you can better explain the purpose behind their methods. Lastly, but certainly not least, you're going to want to indicate the effect that this strategy has on the audience. How do they feel about it? What does it prompt them to do or think? Here we say, this reference to the global geopolitical situation puts America into a more global context and reminds Congress that their values are under direct attack by foreign enemies. This sentence sums up all the work the author did by then relaying the result of said work. You're going to want to replicate this formula 2 more times to discuss the middle of the passage and the end of the passage. In each paragraph, you're going to follow the same key formula. You're going to mention what specific section you're talking about and what strategies are used. You're going to give specific in-text citations of usage of that strategy. You're going to talk about the speaker's intentions with that strategy and why and how they use it. And lastly, you're going to talk about the effect on the audience. Finally, to close out your rhetorical analysis, you're going to give a 1 or 2 sentence summary of the main points from your introduction. So thanks everyone for joining us as we discuss what is a rhetorical analysis and the basics of how to write one. Remember, always analyze rhetoric responsibly.